The gunshot cracked through the autumn air of Holbrook, Arizona, and Juniper Calloway threw herself to the ground so hard her palms scraped raw against the dirt, her whole body trembling like a leaf caught in a windstorm. It was just some fool celebrating outside the saloon, but to her it might as well have been cannon fire. The way her heart hammered against her ribs and her breath came in short, panicked gasps that left her dizzy and disoriented. "Easy there, miss," came a voice so low and gentle it was barely more than a rumble, like distant thunder softened by miles of open prairie. "Just some drunk cowboy firing at the moon. You are safe." Juniper looked up from where she crouched in the middle of the dusty street, her dark hair falling loose from its pins, her gray eyes wide and glassy with the kind of fear that went bone deep. The man standing a respectful distance away was the biggest human being she had ever seen, easily 6.5 feet tall with shoulders broad enough to block out the setting sun. His hair hung past his collar in dark waves, and his buckskin clothing stretched tight across a chest and arms so heavily muscled he looked like he could uproot trees with his bare hands. His face was weathered and tanned, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days of beard growth, but his brown eyes held an unexpected softness as he watched her struggle to her feet. "I'm sorry," she managed, her voice shaking as badly as her hands. "I did not mean to make a spectacle of myself." "Nothing to be sorry for," he said, still speaking in that same quiet tone that seemed calibrated specifically not to startle her further. "I am Benjamin Anderson. Most folks around here call me Bear on account of me living up in the mountains and trapping for a living. I came down to trade some pelts." She brushed ineffectively at her dusty skirts, aware of the curious stares from other people on the street, the whispers that followed her everywhere in this town where she had arrived just 3 weeks ago. "Juniper Calloway," she said, managing to meet his eyes for just a moment before her gaze skittered away. "I teach at the schoolhouse." Benjamin did not move closer, seemed to understand instinctively that she needed space and distance to feel secure. "That's good work," he said. "The children here need proper learning. You came from back east?" "Philadelphia?" she confirmed, wrapping her arms around herself even though the October evening was still warm. "I arrived on the afternoon stage last month. The town needed a teacher, and I needed a fresh start somewhere far from everything I knew." Another gunshot rang out, followed by raucous laughter from the saloon, and Juniper flinched so violently she nearly lost her balance. Benjamin's hand twitched like he wanted to reach out to steady her, but he kept it at his side, his expression full of a concern that made something in her chest ache with a feeling she could not quite name. "Come on," he said softly. "Let me walk you wherever you were heading. I will make sure nobody startles you further this evening." She should have said no. She had learned the hard way that depending on anyone, especially a man, was a dangerous thing. But there was something about Benjamin Anderson that made her feel safer than she had in years, some quality in his quiet strength that promised protection rather than threat. "I was going to the general store," she admitted. "I need lamp oil and some other supplies before it closes for the night." "I will walk with you then," Benjamin said, and he kept his word, maintaining a careful distance of several feet as they made their way down the main street of Holbrook. He did not try to make conversation, seemed content to just be a solid, reassuring presence beside her, and when they reached the store, he waited outside on the wooden sidewalk while she made her purchases. The proprietor, Mrs. Henderson, gave Juniper a knowing look as she wrapped her items. "That is Bear Anderson out there," she said in a low voice. "He comes down from the mountains maybe twice a year. Good man, from what anyone knows, though he keeps to himself mostly. Lives up in the high country trapping beaver and marten and the like. Never heard tell of him causing trouble." Juniper nodded, counting out her coins carefully. The teaching position paid enough for her to get by, but only just, and she had to watch every penny. "He seemed very kind," she said quietly. "Kind enough to notice when a lady needed help," Mrs. Henderson agreed. "Though folks in town have been talking, Miss Calloway, saying you startle at every loud noise, that you dropped a whole stack of books in the schoolhouse when Tommy Jenkins slammed a door. Is everything all right with you?" The familiar shame crept up Juniper's neck like a rash. "I am fine," she said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. "Just a bit nervous in a new place, that is all." She knew Mrs. Henderson did not believe her any more than anyone else in Holbrook did, but the older woman had the grace not to press further. Juniper gathered her purchases and stepped back outside, where Benjamin still waited, his massive frame leaning against one of the posts that supported the awning overhead. "All set?" he asked, and when she nodded, he straightened up and gestured down the street. "Where are you staying?" "The boarding house near the church," she said. "Mrs. Riley rents rooms to single women who work in town." They walked together through the deepening twilight, the sky above turning shades of purple and orange that painted the desert landscape in colors so vivid they almost hurt to look at. Juniper had never seen anything like the vastness of this country, the way the horizon seemed to stretch on forever in every direction, broken only by distant mesas and the scattered vegetation that somehow survived in this harsh climate. "You do not have to be ashamed," Benjamin said suddenly, his voice still low and gentle. "Whatever makes you startle so hard at loud noises, we all carry things that mark us." Juniper's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. "People think I am strange," she whispered. "They talk about me like I'm some sort of curiosity, the nervous schoolteacher who jumps at her own shadow." "Then I will speak soft and move gentle," Benjamin said simply, as though it was the most natural thing in the world to adjust his entire way of being to accommodate her needs. "And anyone who mocks you for being afraid is a fool who has never known real trouble." She stopped walking and turned to look at him fully, this mountain man with his rough clothing and powerful build and eyes that held depths of understanding she had not expected to find in this wild place. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "You do not even know me." Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady on her face. "I know enough," he finally said. "I know you are brave enough to come out here alone and teach children in a town full of strangers. I know you are trying to build a new life, even though something in your past hurt you badly enough to leave scars that do not show on the outside. And I know that you deserve to be treated with kindness and respect, same as any other person." Tears pricked at Juniper's eyes, and she blinked them back fiercely. She had not cried in front of anyone since she left Philadelphia, had promised herself she was done being weak and vulnerable. "Thank you," she managed. "That's very kind of you to say." "Not just saying it," Benjamin replied. "I mean it. Now come on, let us get you home before full dark falls. The desert gets cold quick once the sun goes down." He walked her all the way to Mrs. Riley's boarding house, a neat adobe structure with a small garden out front where a few hardy flowers still bloomed despite the advancing season. At the door, Juniper turned back to him, clutching her package of supplies against her chest like a shield. "Will you be in town long?" she heard herself ask, and then felt foolish for the question. What did it matter to her how long this stranger stayed in Holbrook? "Few days," Benjamin said. "I have pelts to trade and supplies to buy before I head back up into the high country. Winter comes early in the mountains, and I need to be prepared before the first big snows hit." He hesitated, then added, "If you would like, I could walk you to the schoolhouse in the mornings while I'm here. Make sure nobody startles you on the way." It was such a simple offer, and yet it touched something deep inside Juniper that had been frozen for far too long. "I would like that," she admitted, "very much." "Then I will be here at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning," Benjamin promised. "Sleep well, Miss Calloway." She watched him walk away into the gathering darkness, his long stride covering ground, with an easy efficiency that spoke of years spent ranging through wilderness, and she wondered what strange twist of fate had brought this gentle giant into her life at precisely the moment when she needed him most. Inside the boarding house, Mrs. Riley looked up from her knitting with curiosity bright in her eyes. "Was that Bear Anderson I saw you with?" the landlady asked. "My goodness, he's not usually one for socializing when he comes to town." "He was just being kind," Juniper said, but she could not quite keep the small smile off her face as she climbed the stairs to her small room under the eaves. That night, she lay in bed, listening to the sounds of Holbrook settling in for sleep, the distant howl of coyotes on the desert, the creak of the building adjusting to the cooling temperatures. For the first time since she arrived in Arizona territory, she did not feel quite so alone. Benjamin was true to his word, waiting outside the boarding house at precisely 7 o'clock the next morning, with his hat in his hands, and that same gentle expression on his rugged face. Juniper came down the steps with her lesson books tucked under one arm, and she felt some of the perpetual tension in her shoulders ease just at the sight of him. "Good morning," he said quietly. "Ready for another day of teaching?" "As ready as I will ever be," she replied. Though I warn you, walking with me is not very exciting. The schoolhouse is only 3 blocks away." "Then I will enjoy 3 blocks of pleasant company," Benjamin said, and he matched his pace to hers as they set off down the street. The morning air was cool and crisp, smelling of dust and sagebrush and the wood smoke from breakfast fires. A few early risers were already about, and Juniper noticed the curious looks they drew, the tall mountain man and the skittish schoolteacher walking side by side through town. "Do you get lonely?" she found herself asking as they walked. "Living up in the mountains all by yourself?" Benjamin considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But there is a peace up there that I never found around people. The quiet of fresh snow falling through pine trees, the sound of a creek running over rocks. No shouting or fighting or chaos, just the natural rhythms of the wilderness." He glanced at her. "Though I will admit, it is nice to have someone to talk to who does not just growl or chitter back at me." That surprised a laugh out of Juniper, bright and genuine, and Benjamin's face lit up at the sound, like she had given him some precious gift. "I imagine the animals make poor conversationalists," she said, feeling lighter than she had in months. "Terrible," Benjamin agreed solemnly. "The squirrels especially. Very rude, always interrupting." They reached the schoolhouse too soon, a simple wooden building with a bell tower and a small yard where the children played during recess. Already a few early arrivals were chasing each other around, their high voices carrying clearly in the morning air. "Thank you for walking with me," Juniper said, pausing at the bottom of the steps that led up to the door. "It helped more than you know." "I am glad," Benjamin said simply. "I will be here this afternoon too when school lets out, if that is all right with you. Make sure you get home safe." Something warm unfurled in Juniper's chest, fragile and tentative, but real. "I would like that very much," she said softly. Benjamin settled his hat back on his head and nodded to her, then turned and walked back toward the main street where the trading post stood. Juniper watched him go for a moment longer than was probably proper, then shook herself and headed inside to prepare for the day's lessons. The children filtered in over the next half hour, ranging in age from 6 to 14. There were only 18 students in total, the sons and daughters of ranchers and shopkeepers, and the few families who had settled in and around Holbrook. Most of them were good kids, eager to learn, though a few of the older boys liked to test her patience with their antics. She was in the middle of a geography lesson, pointing out locations on the large map that hung on the wall, when the door suddenly banged open, and Thomas Wheeler, one of the older boys, came rushing in late. The crash of wood against wood made Juniper jump so violently that she dropped the pointer she'd been holding, her whole body going rigid with instinctive fear. The children went silent, staring at her with wide eyes, and she felt the familiar burn of shame creeping up her neck. "I'm sorry," she managed, bending to retrieve the fallen pointer with hands that shook visibly. "You just startled me, Thomas. Please take your seat." "Yes, Miss Calloway," the boy mumbled, looking guilty as he slid into his desk. "Did not mean to scare you." She took a deep breath and forced herself to continue the lesson, pointing out the Mississippi River and the Atlantic Ocean and all the vast distance that separated Arizona territory from the life she had left behind. But she could feel the children's eyes on her, concerned and confused, and she knew they would go home and tell their parents about the strange teacher who could not handle a simple door opening. By the time school let out at 3 o'clock, Juniper's nerves were frayed raw, and she wanted nothing more than to retreat to her room and hide from the world. But when she stepped outside with the last of the students, Benjamin was there waiting, leaning against the fence with his arms crossed over his broad chest and a calm expression on his face that immediately made her feel more settled. "How was your day?" he asked as she approached, and his voice was pitched low enough that it did not carry to the children still playing in the yard. "It was fine," she said automatically, then paused and corrected herself. "Actually, it was difficult. I startled badly when a student came in late and slammed the door, and now all the children think their teacher is strange and frightened of everything." Benjamin fell into step beside her as they began walking back toward the boarding house. "Children are resilient," he said, "and kinder than adults usually. I bet they just wanted to make sure you were all right." "Maybe," Juniper said doubtfully. "Or maybe they will tell their parents that the new teacher is not fit for the position." They walked in silence for a few moments, passing the bank and the hardware store and the small church with its white painted steeple. Finally, Benjamin spoke again, his words careful and measured. "Can I ask what happened to you, Juniper? What made you so afraid of loud noises and sudden movements?" She should have deflected, should have given him some polite non-answer that protected her privacy. But there was something about Benjamin that made her want to be honest, to share the burden she had been carrying alone for so long. "I was engaged to be married," she said quietly, staring straight ahead as they walked. "To a man named Richard Thompson. He was a lawyer in Philadelphia, very successful and charming. Everyone said I was lucky to have caught his attention." She swallowed hard. "But after we were engaged, after I was committed to him, he changed, started drinking heavily, got angry over little things, and when he got angry, he got violent." Benjamin's hands curled into fists at his sides, but his voice stayed soft when he spoke. "He hurt you." "Many times," Juniper confirmed, and even now, months later and hundreds of miles away, the memories made her skin crawl. "He would grab me hard enough to leave bruises, shove me into walls, throw things at my head, and he would scream at me, horrible things about how I was worthless and stupid and lucky anyone would want me. The shouting was almost worse than the hitting sometimes. I learned to be very afraid of loud voices and sudden movements, because they meant pain was coming." "How did you get away?" Benjamin asked, and there was something dangerous in his tone now, a barely restrained fury that would have frightened her if she thought for even a moment it was directed at her. "I saved every penny I could," Juniper said, "hid money in the lining of my coat, in the toes of old shoes, anywhere he would not think to look. And then, one day when he was at work, I packed a single bag and walked out the door. I went straight to the train station and bought a ticket going as far west as my money would take me. I ended up here, in Holbrook, because they needed a teacher, and I needed to disappear." They had reached the boarding house, but neither of them moved toward the door. Benjamin stood looking at her with an expression that held both sorrow and admiration, his dark eyes reflecting the afternoon sunlight. "You are the bravest person I have ever met," he said finally. "To survive that, and then build a whole new life for yourself out here. That takes more courage than anything I have ever done." "I do not feel brave," Juniper said, her voice breaking slightly. "I feel broken and scared all the time. I hate that he did this to me, that he took away my ability to feel safe in the world." "You are not broken," Benjamin said firmly. "You are healing. There is a difference." He hesitated, then very slowly and carefully reached out his hand, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted. "May I?" Juniper looked at his outstretched hand, large and calloused and strong, and after a moment she placed her own, much smaller hand in his. His palm was warm, his grip gentle despite the obvious power in those fingers, and he squeezed her hand softly before releasing it. "Thank you for trusting me with your story," he said, "and I promise you, for as long as I'm in Holbrook, I will do everything I can to help you feel safe." "You are only here for a few more days," Juniper pointed out, trying to keep the disappointment out of her voice. "Then you will go back to your mountains and I will be here alone again." Benjamin's jaw tightened like he was struggling with something internal. "About that," he said slowly, "I have been thinking. Winter is coming, and the high country gets harsh and isolated. Maybe this year I could stay down here in town, do some work for the local ranchers or the sawmill. Just for the winter months." Hope fluttered in Juniper's chest, fragile and terrifying. "You would stay? Just like that?" "Not just like that," Benjamin said, and his gaze was steady and honest on hers. "I would stay because in 2 days I have come to care about you more than I have cared about anyone in a very long time. Because I want to know you better, want to hear you laugh more, want to help you heal from what that bastard did to you. If that is something you might want too." Juniper's breath caught in her throat. It was too fast, too sudden, too risky to let herself feel this way about someone she barely knew. But standing there in the fading afternoon light with this gentle giant who spoke softly and moved carefully and looked at her like she was something precious, she could not bring herself to push him away. "I think I would like that very much," she whispered. "But Benjamin, I am not whole. I do not know if I will ever be able to be what a man would want, to feel comfortable with touching and closeness and all the things that come with courting." "Then we will go slow," Benjamin said simply. "As slow as you need. I am a patient man, Juniper. I can wait for you to heal at your own pace, and I will never push you for more than you are ready to give. I just want the chance to know you, to be near you, to maybe help you feel safe again." Tears spilled down Juniper's cheeks before she could stop them, and Benjamin made a soft sound of distress. "Did I say something wrong?" he asked urgently. "I'm sorry if I upset you." "No," Juniper said, laughing and crying at the same time. "You said everything right. I'm just not used to anyone being this kind to me. It is overwhelming in the best possible way." Benjamin pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her, and she took it gratefully, dabbing at her eyes and trying to compose herself. Around them, the town continued its evening routines, oblivious to the small miracle happening on the steps of the boarding house. "So you will stay?" she asked, needing to hear him confirm it. "I will stay," Benjamin promised, "through the winter at least, and we will see where things go from there." That night, Juniper lay in bed with a smile on her face for the first time in longer than she could remember. The future still felt uncertain and frightening, but for the first time she had hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find happiness again. True to his word, Benjamin found work at a ranch just outside town, helping with the cattle and fixing fences and doing all the heavy labor that ranch life required. He rented a small room above the livery stable, close enough that he could walk to the boarding house every morning to escort Juniper to school and be there every afternoon to walk her home again. The routine became the anchoring point of both their days. Benjamin would arrive at 7 o'clock sharp, always speaking in that same low, gentle voice, always moving with deliberate care so as not to startle her. They would walk slowly through the morning streets of Holbrook, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about the children she taught, about her life in Philadelphia before Richard, about the books she loved and the dreams she had once held. He told her about growing up in Missouri before heading west, about learning to trap and hunt and survive in the wilderness, about the beauty of the high country when spring came and wildflowers carpeted the meadows. Weeks passed, and October gave way to November. The weather cooled further, and the few trees in town shed their leaves in drifts of gold and brown. Juniper found herself looking forward to their walks with an eagerness that both thrilled and frightened her. Benjamin never pushed, never demanded more than she was ready to give. But his steady presence in her life was slowly helping her remember how to trust again. One Saturday afternoon, he invited her to go riding with him out into the desert beyond town. "I found a spot I think you might like," he said, "a canyon with red rock walls and a little spring where cottonwood trees grow. It is peaceful and quiet, no loud noises or crowds of people. Will you come with me?" Juniper had not been on a horse since she was a girl, but the idea of spending an afternoon alone with Benjamin away from the gossip and curious stares of town was too appealing to resist. "I would love to," she said. He borrowed a gentle mare from the livery for her and saddled his own horse, a big buckskin gelding that looked like the only animal strong enough to carry his substantial weight. They rode out of town heading east, following a faint trail that wound between stands of juniper and piñon pine. The landscape was stark and beautiful, all pale sand and dark stone under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Benjamin kept his horse close to hers, ready to help if she needed it, but Juniper found that riding was like most skills from childhood, something the body remembered even when the mind had forgotten. The gentle rocking motion was soothing, and the vast openness of the desert made her feel small in a way that was comforting rather than frightening. They rode for nearly an hour before Benjamin guided them into a narrow canyon where the walls rose 30 feet high on either side, smooth and striated in shades of red and orange and cream. At the far end, a spring bubbled up from between the rocks, creating a small pool surrounded by brilliant green grass and a stand of cottonwood trees whose golden leaves rattled softly in the breeze. "Oh," Juniper breathed, sliding down from her horse to stand at the edge of the pool. "This is beautiful." "I thought you might like it," Benjamin said, dismounting with easy grace despite his size. He pulled a blanket and a basket from his saddlebags and spread them out under the trees. "I brought lunch if you were hungry. Nothing fancy, just bread and cheese and some apples, but I thought we could make an afternoon of it." They sat together on the blanket, close but not touching, and ate while the horses cropped grass nearby and desert sparrows sang from the branches overhead. The peace of the place sank into Juniper's bones, easing tensions she had not even known she was carrying. "Can I ask you something?" Benjamin said eventually, his voice barely louder than the whisper of wind through leaves. "That morning when we met, when the gunshot startled you in the street, what made you decide to trust me?" Juniper thought about it, trying to put into words something she had felt more than thought. "Your eyes," she said finally. "When you looked at me, there was no judgment in them, no mockery or cruelty, just kindness and concern. And your voice. Even though you were so big and strong, you spoke so gently, like you understood that I needed softness right then." She turned to look at him fully. "Why did you help me? You did not know me at all." Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, gazing out at the red canyon walls. "My mother," he said eventually. "She was like you, jumpy and frightened, especially toward the end. My father was a hard man, quick with his fists and his belt. I was too young to protect her when I was growing up, but I swore when I got older that I would never let fear of me touch another soul, that I would use my strength to protect, not to harm. When I saw you there in the street, so scared and trying so hard to be brave, I saw my mother, and I knew I had to help if I could." "What happened to her?" Juniper asked gently. "She died when I was 16, Benjamin said, and even after all these years, grief colored his voice. Fever took her one winter. I think part of her was relieved to go, to finally be free of living in fear. After she was gone, I left home and headed west. Been on my own ever since, mostly." Juniper reached out slowly and placed her hand over his where it rested on the blanket. He went very still, then carefully turned his palm up and threaded his fingers through hers. His hand dwarfed hers, rough with calluses and old scars, but his touch was impossibly gentle. "I am sorry you lost her," she said, "but I think she would be proud of the man you became." "I hope so," Benjamin said. "I try to live in a way that would honor her memory. Try to be the kind of person who makes the world a little less frightening for others." They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, watching the play of sunlight on water and stone. It was the longest physical contact Juniper had allowed with anyone since leaving Philadelphia, and while her instincts still screamed at her to pull away, to protect herself, she forced herself to breathe through the fear and trust that Benjamin would not hurt her. Eventually, he sensed her growing tension and released her hand, giving her space without making a big production of it. They packed up their picnic and rode back to town as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. "Thank you for today," Juniper said when they reached the livery stable, dismounting with legs that were pleasantly sore from the long ride. "It was exactly what I needed." "We can do it again whenever you like," Benjamin said. "I'm finding that I like spending time with you, Miss Calloway, more than I have liked anything in a very long time." "Just Juniper," she said, feeling bold. "I think we are past formalities at this point, Benjamin." He smiled at her, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his weathered face into something almost boyish. "Juniper," he repeated like he was savoring the taste of her name. "I will see you tomorrow morning at 7. "I will be waiting," she promised. The days continued to pass, each one bringing small moments of healing and connection. Benjamin started joining Juniper for Sunday services at the little church, sitting beside her in the pew and adding his deep voice to the hymns. Afterward, they would often walk together through town, stopping to chat with neighbors and slowly becoming an accepted part of the community fabric. Juniper learned that while Benjamin was quiet and reserved, he had a dry sense of humor that emerged at unexpected moments, making her laugh with wry observations about the people and situations around them. She learned that he was remarkably well-read despite his rough exterior, that he carried a battered copy of Shakespeare's sonnets in his saddlebag and could quote long passages from memory. She learned that he carved small wooden animals in his spare time, his large hands capable of surprising delicacy, and he started leaving little gifts for her, a tiny bird, a leaping deer, a sleeping fox placed on her desk at the schoolhouse or on the porch of the boarding house. In turn, Benjamin learned that Juniper had a beautiful singing voice that she was too shy to use in front of others. He learned that she was fiercely protective of her students and would advocate tirelessly for any child who needed extra help or support. He learned that she loved coffee but could never quite make it strong enough, that she read novels late into the night by lamplight, that she had a gift for sketching and filled notebooks with drawings of the desert landscape and the people of Holbrook. November gave way to December, and the first real cold of winter settled over the high desert. Benjamin started bringing Juniper a shawl in the mornings, wrapping it around her shoulders with careful hands before they began their walk to the schoolhouse. He started staying for lunch sometimes, sitting on the steps outside while she ate inside, just to provide his steady presence through the middle of her day. The children in her class had grown accustomed to seeing the big mountain man waiting for their teacher, and they started greeting him enthusiastically when school let out. Benjamin would nod solemnly to each of them, remembering all their names despite only hearing them once, occasionally helping lift a small child down from the school steps or retrieving a ball that had rolled too far. "They adore you," Juniper told him one afternoon as they watched the students scatter toward home. "Thomas Wheeler told me yesterday that when he grows up, he wants to be big and strong like Mr. Anderson." Benjamin looked both pleased and embarrassed by this information. "I'm just trying to set a good example," he said. "Show them that a man can be strong without being cruel, that size and power should be used to protect rather than dominate." "You are doing that," Juniper assured him, "for them and for me." As Christmas approached, the town began preparing for the holiday. A large pine tree was erected in the square, and families hung decorations and lit candles in their windows. Juniper found herself caught up in the excitement despite her usual caution, helping her students prepare a Christmas pageant and teaching them carols to perform for their parents. On Christmas Eve, Benjamin asked if he could escort her to the community celebration at the church. "I know you do not like crowds," he said carefully, "but I thought maybe with me there, it might be easier. We can leave anytime you feel overwhelmed." Juniper agreed, and that evening she put on her best dress, a deep blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes, and met Benjamin outside the boarding house. He was wearing clean clothes and had trimmed his beard, looking unusually formal, and the way his eyes widened when he saw her made her feel beautiful for the first time in years. "You look lovely," he said, his voice rough with sincerity. Thank you," she replied, blushing. "You look very handsome yourself." He offered her his arm, and after only a moment's hesitation, she took it, letting him escort her through the cold night air to the church. Inside, the building was warm with body heat and candlelight, packed with what seemed like every resident of Holbrook and the surrounding ranches. Juniper felt her anxiety spike at the noise and press of bodies, but Benjamin kept her tucked close to his side, using his bulk to create a buffer between her and the crowd. They found seats near the back, and when the service began, Benjamin's presence beside her was like an anchor, solid and reassuring. The children performed their pageant beautifully, and Juniper felt pride swell in her chest at how hard they had worked. When it came time for the congregation to sing carols, Benjamin's deep voice blended with her lighter one, and she felt a sense of belonging she had not experienced since before her life fell apart. Afterward, there were cookies and hot cider in the church hall, and people came up to compliment Juniper on how well the children had performed. Benjamin stayed close, ready to intervene if anyone got too loud or boisterous, but Juniper found herself managing better than she expected, able to accept praise and make small talk without dissolving into anxiety. When they finally stepped back out into the cold night air, she felt exhausted, but also triumphant. "I did it," she said, turning to Benjamin with a smile. "I made it through a whole crowded event without falling apart." "You did more than make it through," Benjamin said warmly. "You thrived. The children were wonderful, and that is because of all your hard work with them." They walked slowly back toward the boarding house, reluctant to end the evening. The streets were quiet now, most people still at the church or already home in bed. Above, stars glittered in a sky so clear and vast it took Juniper's breath away. I have something for you," Benjamin said when they reached the boarding house steps. He pulled a small package wrapped in brown paper from his coat pocket. "Merry Christmas, Juniper." She took the package with trembling fingers and carefully unwrapped it to reveal a wooden carving of a juniper tree, every branch and needle rendered in exquisite detail. It was no bigger than her palm, but the craftsmanship was extraordinary, clearly representing hours of painstaking work. "Benjamin," she breathed, "this is beautiful. How long did this take you?" "A few weeks," he admitted. "I worked on it in the evenings by lamplight in my room. I wanted you to have something that represented both who you are and your name." The juniper tree is tough and resilient, able to thrive in harsh conditions. It reminded me of you. Tears pricked at Juniper's eyes. I do not have anything nearly as wonderful to give you, she said. You have given me plenty, Benjamin said softly. You have given me a reason to stay in one place, to be part of a community again. You have given me your trust, which I know is not something you give lightly. That is gift enough for any man. Juniper looked up at him, this gentle giant who had somehow slipped past all her defenses and made a home in her heart. Can I hug you? She heard herself ask. I know we have been going slow, but I just really want to hug you right now. Benjamin's face lit up with cautious joy. Of course you can, he said. Always, whenever you want. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her face against his broad chest. For just a moment, her old fear tried to rise up, screaming at her to pull away, that being this close to a man meant danger. But she breathed through it, focusing on the steady beat of Benjamin's heart under her ear, the warmth of his body blocking out the winter cold, the way his arms came around her so carefully, holding her like she was something precious and fragile. Thank you, she whispered against his chest. Thank you for being patient with me, for helping me heal, for seeing me as more than just my fear. Always, Benjamin rumbled, and she could feel the vibration of his voice through his chest. For as long as you will have me in your life, I will be here. They stood like that for a long moment before Juniper finally pulled back, wiping at her eyes and laughing a little at herself. I am a mess, she said. You're perfect, Benjamin corrected gently. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair back from her face with careful fingers. Get some rest. I will see you tomorrow. Good night, Benjamin, she said, clutching the carved juniper tree to her chest. Merry Christmas. She lay in bed that night, turning the carving over in her hands, marveling at the detail and the care that had gone into its creation. Outside, snow began to fall, the first real snow of the winter, covering Holbrook in a blanket of white. The new year of 1883 arrived with clear, cold weather and a sense of new possibilities. Juniper and Benjamin continued their daily routine, walking together to and from the schoolhouse, spending Sundays together after church, taking occasional rides out into the desert when the weather permitted. Their relationship deepened gradually, built on a foundation of trust and mutual respect that grew stronger with each passing day. Juniper found that her startle reflex, while still present, was beginning to ease. She could now handle the slam of a door without completely falling apart, and loud voices in the street made her tense, but no longer sent her into full panic. She credited much of this improvement to Benjamin's steady presence, the way he had shown her through consistent action that not all men were dangerous, that strength could be gentle and power could protect. In late January, a bitter cold snap settled over the territory, bringing temperatures low enough to freeze the water trough solid and make venturing outside miserable. On one particularly brutal morning, Benjamin showed up at the boarding house with news that the school would be closed for the day, as the building could not be heated adequately to keep the children comfortable. So you have a day off, he said, stamping snow from his boots on the porch. What would you like to do with your unexpected freedom? Stay warm, Juniper said immediately, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Maybe read by the fire. What about you? I need to check on the stock at the ranch. Make sure the cattle are managing all right in this cold, Benjamin said. But I should be back by early afternoon. Could I take you to dinner at the hotel restaurant tonight? They have a dining room, quiet and respectable, and I thought it might be nice to have a meal together somewhere other than a picnic blanket or church steps. Juniper felt her pulse quicken with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Dinner together at a restaurant felt official somehow, like a declaration that they were courting seriously rather than just spending time as friends. I would like that, she said. Good, Benjamin said, and his smile was warm despite the cold that reddened his cheeks. I will pick you up at 6 o'clock. Dress warm, the walk will be cold. That afternoon, Juniper took extra care with her appearance, putting on her nicest dress and pinning up her hair in a style that took far longer than her usual simple bun. Mrs. Riley noticed her preparations and grinned knowingly. That Bear Anderson is courting you proper, the landlady said. The whole town has noticed how he dotes on you, and it does my heart good to see. You deserve happiness, Miss Calloway, after whatever drove you out here. He is a good man, Juniper agreed softly. "The best kind," Mrs. Riley said. "The kind that does not need to prove how strong he is because everyone can already see it. Those are the men worth keeping." When Benjamin arrived at 6 o'clock precisely, he was wearing his cleanest clothes and had clearly made an effort to tame his long hair. He helped Juniper into her coat with gentle hands and offered her his arm for the walk to the hotel. The restaurant was indeed quiet and respectable, with only a handful of other diners scattered among the tables. Benjamin had reserved a table in the corner, away from the kitchen and the main flow of traffic, demonstrating his continued awareness of what would make her feel most comfortable. They ordered roast beef and potatoes, vegetables, and fresh bread, and as they ate they talked about everything from the latest books they had read to Benjamin's plans for returning to trapping in the spring to Juniper's hopes for her students' progress. "Can I ask you something?" Benjamin said eventually, setting down his fork and looking at her seriously. "And please know that you do not have to answer if you do not want to." "You can ask," Juniper said, curious. "Have you heard anything from your former fiancé?" Benjamin asked carefully. "Any indication that he might have tried to find you or come after you?" Juniper's appetite vanished instantly, replaced by the cold grip of old fear. "No," she said quietly. "I've heard nothing, and I pray it stays that way. I tried to cover my tracks when I left, told no one where I was going, bought my train ticket with cash, but I still worry sometimes that he will find me, that he will come here and drag me back to Philadelphia." Benjamin's jaw tightened, and there was steel in his voice when he spoke. "He will have to go through me first," he said, "and I promise you, Juniper, that man will never lay another hand on you, not while I am breathing." She believed him absolutely, could see the fierce protectiveness in his eyes and the set of his shoulders. "I hope it never comes to that," she said. "I just want to build my life here in peace, to forget he ever existed." "Then that is what we will do," Benjamin said. "We will focus on the future, on building something good together, and we will not let the past steal any more from you than it already has." The rest of the dinner passed in lighter conversation, and by the time they finished their meal and stepped back out into the frozen night, Juniper felt warm from the inside out, filled with good food and better company. "Thank you for tonight," she said as they walked slowly back toward the boarding house. "It was lovely." "The first of many, I hope," Benjamin said, "if you are agreeable to continuing to let me court you properly." Juniper stopped walking and turned to face him, looking up at his face in the glow of the street lamp. "I'm very agreeable to that," she said. "In fact, I cannot imagine my life now without you in it. You have become essential to me, Benjamin, more important than I ever thought anyone could be again." He cupped her face gently in his large hands, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones with infinite care. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I've been wanting to for weeks now, but I did not want to push." Juniper's heart hammered in her chest, but it was not fear that drove it this time. It was anticipation, desire, the want to experience this intimacy with a man she trusted completely. "Yes," she whispered. "Please." Benjamin bent down slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind, and when his lips finally met hers, it was gentle and sweet and perfect. He kissed her like she was precious, like he had all the time in the world, and when he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard and grinning like fools. "That was nice," Juniper said, understating wildly, and Benjamin laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Very nice," he agreed. "Can I do it again?" "I was hoping you would," she said, and this time, when he kissed her, she let herself sink into it, let herself feel the joy and rightness of being held by someone who would never hurt her. They stood on the frozen street for longer than was probably proper, stealing kisses between bouts of laughter and whispered words, until finally the cold drove them to move. Benjamin walked her to the boarding house door and kissed her once more before bidding her good night. And Juniper floated up the stairs to her room feeling like she had been given a precious gift. Winter gradually loosened its grip on the territory, and February brought warmer temperatures and the first signs of spring. Juniper's relationship with Benjamin continued to deepen, moving from friendship and tentative courtship into something more solid and committed. They talked seriously about the future, about what would happen when spring came fully and Benjamin traditionally returned to the high country. "I do not want to go back to trapping," he told her one Sunday afternoon as they walked along the mostly dry bed of the Rio Puerco. "Or at least, not permanently. I have been thinking that I could homestead some land, Maybe find a place with good water and timber where I could build a house and run some cattle. Stay in one place year-round instead of moving with the seasons." "That sounds wonderful," Juniper said. "Where were you thinking?" "There's a valley about 10 miles north of here," Benjamin said. "Good grass, a year-round creek protected from the worst of the winter winds. I rode out there last week to look at it, and I think I could build something solid there. Make a real home." He paused, then added carefully, "A home that could have room for 2 people if you were interested." Juniper's breath caught. "Benjamin Anderson, are you asking me to marry you?" "Not officially," he said quickly. "Not yet. I know we have only been together a few months, and I want to give you more time to be sure, to know your own heart. But yes, I am saying that I want to marry you, Juniper. I want to build a life with you, have children with you if you want them, grow old together on that land. I am saying that I love you, and I want you to be my wife when you are ready." Tears streamed down Juniper's face, but they were happy tears this time. "I love you too," she said. "I thought I would never be able to say those words again, never be able to trust anyone enough to let them into my heart. But you have been so patient and kind and good. And I do love you, Benjamin. So much it frightens me sometimes." He pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, pressing her face against his chest and letting him hold her while she cried out all the emotion that had been building inside her. When she finally pulled back, he was smiling at her with such tenderness it made her heart ache. "So is that a yes?" he asked. "Will you marry me when you are ready?" "Yes," Juniper said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I will marry you. Not right away. I still need some time to be sure I am healed enough to be a good wife. But yes, absolutely yes." Benjamin whooped with joy and lifted her clear off her feet, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her soundly, pouring all his love and happiness into the contact, and Juniper kissed him back with equal fervor. They told Mrs. Riley first, and the landlady burst into happy tears and immediately started planning what Juniper should wear and how they should decorate the church. Word spread quickly through Holbrook, and soon it seemed everyone in town knew that the schoolteacher and the mountain man were engaged to be married. The response was overwhelmingly positive. The children in Juniper's class were thrilled, especially when she assured them that she would continue teaching after the marriage. The parents approved of the match, having seen how Benjamin treated Juniper with respect and care. Even the few skeptics who thought the relationship had moved too fast were won over by the obvious devotion the couple showed each other. Benjamin filed his claim on the land he had scouted, and in early March he began the work of building their house. It was backbreaking labor, but he threw himself into it with enthusiasm, wanting everything to be perfect for his bride. On weekends, Juniper would ride out to help however she could, holding boards while he hammered, sketching plans for where the furniture might go, planting the first seeds of what would become their garden. The house took shape slowly over the following months, a solid structure of logs and stone with a wide front porch and large windows that would let in plenty of light. Benjamin built it with care and skill. Every board fitted precisely, every corner square, creating something that would stand for generations. In May, with the house nearly complete and wildflowers blooming across the valley, they set a wedding date. They would marry in June after the school year ended, giving Juniper the summer to move into the new house and settle into married life before the fall term began. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of preparation. Mrs. Riley helped Juniper sew a simple but beautiful wedding dress of white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. The women of the town organized a celebration to follow the ceremony, promising food and music and dancing. Benjamin finished the house and spent his evenings building furniture, crafting a bed frame and a table and chairs and all the other necessities of their new home. Juniper found herself largely free of the anxiety that had plagued her for so long. She still startled occasionally at sudden loud noises, probably always would, but the constant underlying fear had eased significantly. She credited this healing to Benjamin's patient love, to the safety she felt in his presence, to the way he had shown her through consistent action that she deserved respect and kindness. The morning of her wedding dawned clear and beautiful, the sky a perfect blue dome overhead. Juniper stood in her room at the boarding house putting the final touches on her appearance, her hands surprisingly steady as she pinned up her hair and settled the simple veil Mrs. Riley had lent her. "You look beautiful," the landlady said, tears already streaming down her face, "like an angel come to earth." "I feel beautiful," Juniper said, and it was true. For the first time in years, she felt whole and hopeful and ready to embrace whatever the future held. They walked together to the church, where it seemed the entire population of Holbrook had gathered to witness the ceremony. Juniper's students had decorated the building with wildflowers and ribbons, transforming the simple space into something magical. And at the front, waiting by the altar with the minister, stood Benjamin. He was wearing a new suit that fit his massive frame surprisingly well, his hair neatly tied back, his beard trimmed close. But what took Juniper's breath away was the expression on his face when he saw her, the way his eyes lit up and his whole being seemed to radiate joy and love and awe. She walked down the aisle on Mrs. Riley's arm, her eyes locked on Benjamin's, and when she reached him, he took her hands in his and squeezed gently. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. "So are you," she whispered back, and his answering smile was brilliant. The ceremony itself passed in a haze of happiness. They spoke their vows in clear, firm voices, promising to love and cherish each other for all their days. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and told Benjamin he could kiss his bride, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her with such tenderness that several people in the congregation openly wept. The celebration afterward was raucous and joyful, with music and dancing and more food than Juniper had seen in one place since arriving in Arizona territory. She danced with Benjamin, with several of her students' fathers, with the town's elderly mayor who insisted on one turn around the floor with the bride. Benjamin watched her like she might disappear if he looked away, his face reflecting such deep contentment that it made Juniper's heart swell. As the sun began to set, they said their goodbyes and climbed into the wagon Benjamin had prepared, loaded with gifts and well wishes from the community. They drove out to their new home as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, and when they arrived, Benjamin lifted Juniper down from the wagon seat and carried her across the threshold of their house. He set her down gently in the main room, where lamps were already lit and everything was clean and ready for them. "Welcome home, Mrs. Anderson," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Welcome home, Mr. Anderson," Juniper replied, reaching up to cup his bearded cheek. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Benjamin said, "more than I have words to express. You have given me everything I never knew I needed." That night, in the house Benjamin had built with his own hands, they came together as husband and wife with tenderness and patience and joy. Benjamin was gentle and careful, constantly checking to make sure Juniper was comfortable, and she found that the fear she had carried for so long simply melted away in the face of his love. This was nothing like the violence and pain she had experienced before. This was beautiful and right, a union of souls as much as bodies. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed he had crafted, Juniper's head pillowed on Benjamin's broad chest, his arms wrapped securely around her. Through the open window came the night sounds of the desert, the chirp of crickets and the distant howl of coyotes, and above them, stars glittered in impossible profusion. "I never thought I could be this happy," Juniper said softly. "I thought Richard had broken something in me that could never be fixed." "You were never broken," Benjamin said, his hand stroking gently through her loose hair. "Just hurt. And hurt things can heal, given time and the right conditions." "You were the right conditions," Juniper said. "You and your patience and your soft voice and gentle movements. You saved me, Benjamin." "We saved each other," he corrected. "You gave me a reason to rejoin the world, to be part of something bigger than just my own survival. You made me whole too." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, and when morning came, they woke to their first full day as husband and wife, ready to begin building their life together. The years that followed were good ones, filled with hard work and simple joys. Juniper continued teaching at the Holbrook School, riding into town each morning and returning each afternoon to the home she shared with Benjamin. He worked their homestead, raising cattle and horses, maintaining the house and buildings, clearing more land for crops and pasture. In the spring of 1884, Juniper discovered she was pregnant. The news filled both of them with excitement and not a little fear. as neither had much experience with babies, and childbirth was still a dangerous undertaking even in the best of circumstances. But Dr. Jameson in town assured them that Juniper was healthy and strong. And throughout the summer and fall, Benjamin doted on his wife with even more care than usual, making sure she did not overexert herself and anticipating her every need. On a cold December night, with snow falling softly outside and the fire burning bright in the hearth, Juniper went into labor. Mrs. Riley came to assist, along with 2 other women from town who had experience with birthing. Benjamin paced in the main room, anxious and helpless, starting at every sound from the bedroom. It was a long labor, stretching through the night and into the following morning, and more than once Benjamin nearly broke down the door in his worry. But finally, just as dawn was breaking, the sound of a baby's cry filled the house. Mrs. Riley emerged moments later, grinning broadly. "You have a son," she announced. "A big, healthy boy with a fine set of lungs on him. Mother and baby are both doing well." Benjamin rushed past her into the bedroom, where Juniper lay exhausted but smiling in the bed, a tiny bundle cradled in her arms. He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the red-faced infant who was his son. "He is perfect," Benjamin breathed. "Absolutely perfect." "He looks like you," Juniper said fondly. "Already so big and strong." They named him Thomas Riley Anderson, after Juniper's father and the landlady who had been so good to them both. From the first moment, Benjamin was a devoted father, holding his son with the same careful gentleness he had always shown Juniper, speaking softly and moving carefully so as not to startle the baby. Juniper took the rest of the school year off to recover and care for Thomas, and Benjamin hired a young man from town to help with the heavier ranch work so he could spend more time with his family. Those early months were exhausting, filled with sleepless nights and constant worry, but they were also magical, watching their son grow and change with each passing day. In 1886, they were blessed with a second child, a daughter they named Mary Ann Grace. She was smaller than Thomas had been, with Juniper's gray eyes and her mother's sweet temperament. Thomas, now 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything, though his help was not always as useful as he believed. The house that had once seemed so spacious now rang with the sounds of children, and Benjamin and Juniper would not have had it any other way. They added on to the original structure, building more bedrooms and a larger kitchen, making room for their growing family. Juniper eventually returned to teaching, though only part-time, and the school board was accommodating about letting her bring the children with her when they were young. Benjamin would often ride into town at lunchtime to check on his family, and the children of Holbrook grew up seeing the big mountain man as a gentle, loving father who played with his kids and treated his wife with unwavering respect and affection. In 1888, they welcomed a third child, another son they named David Bennett. He was a serious baby who watched everything with solemn eyes, and as he grew, he showed a keen intelligence and curiosity about the world around him. With 3 children now, life at the Anderson homestead was chaotic and loud and full of love. Juniper's startle reflex never completely disappeared, but it faded to the point where it was barely noticeable, just an occasional flinch at an unexpected sound. Benjamin never stopped being mindful of it, never stopped speaking softly and moving gently around her, and he taught their children to do the same. They grew up understanding that some people carried hurts that did not show on the outside, and that the proper response was kindness and patience, not mockery or impatience. The Anderson family became a fixture in the Holbrook community, respected and well-liked by all who knew them. Benjamin occasionally took on young men who needed work and guidance, teaching them ranching skills and carpentry, providing the kind of steady male presence that he wished he had known growing up. Juniper's school continued to thrive, and she was known throughout the territory as an exceptional teacher who truly cared about her students. As the years passed, Arizona territory changed around them. More settlers arrived, the railroad expanded, and in 1912, Arizona finally achieved statehood. Through it all, the Andersons remained on their homestead, raising their children and working their land and being a beacon of what love and commitment could build. Thomas grew into a man much like his father, big and strong and gentle, and he married a sweet girl from town and started his own ranch nearby. Mary Ann became a teacher like her mother, taking over Juniper's position at the school when Juniper finally retired. David showed an aptitude for medicine and eventually went east to study, returning as Dr. Anderson to practice in Holbrook and serve the community. All three children married and had families of their own, and Benjamin and Juniper found themselves grandparents many times over. Their house was always full of noise and laughter when the family gathered for holidays and celebrations, exactly the kind of joyful chaos that both of them had dreamed of, but never quite believed possible in their younger years. On a warm spring evening in 1925, Benjamin and Juniper sat together on the porch of the house he had built more than 40 years earlier, watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold. They were both in their 60s now, their hair gray and their movements slower, but the love between them had only deepened with time. "Do you remember the day we met?" Juniper asked, her hand clasped in Benjamin's as it had been so many thousands of times before. "Every detail," Benjamin said. "You were so frightened, crouched in the middle of the street, and I just wanted to help you feel safe." "You did more than that," Juniper said softly. "You gave me my life back. You showed me that I could trust again, love again, be happy again. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "You saved me too," Benjamin reminded her, bringing her hand to his lips for a gentle kiss. "Gave me a reason to stop running, to build something permanent and good. Every day with you has been a gift." They sat in comfortable silence as the light faded and stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting, their wedding, the birth of their children and grandchildren. The desert night wrapped around them like a blanket, peaceful and perfect. "I love you," Juniper said. "I will love you for all my days and beyond." "And I love you," Benjamin replied, "my brave, beautiful wife, then and now and always." Inside the house they could hear the sounds of family as Thomas and his wife had brought their children for a visit. Soon someone would call them in for dinner, and the evening would be filled with food and conversation and laughter. But for now, Benjamin and Juniper sat together in the gathering darkness, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from broken pieces. They had started with a mountain man who spoke soft and moved gentle, and a woman who startled at loud noises. They had built a love that healed wounds and created life, and stood as testament to the power of patience and kindness and unwavering commitment. And that love would endure, passed down through generations, long after they were gone. The story of Benjamin and Juniper Anderson became legend in Holbrook, told to children and grandchildren as an example of true love and devotion. It was the story of a man who used his strength to protect rather than dominate, and a woman who found the courage to heal and trust again. It was a love story written in the wide-open spaces of the American West, as enduring as the mountains and as vast as the desert sky. And it was a story with a happy ending, the kind where love conquers all, and two broken people find wholeness in each other and build a life filled with joy and purpose, and the kind of quiet contentment that is the greatest blessing of all. They lived out their days together on that homestead Benjamin had carved from the wilderness, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and the legacy of a love that had transformed them both. In the end, that is what love is supposed to do: transform and heal, and make the unbearable bearable and the impossible possible. Benjamin and Juniper understood this in their bones, had lived it every day of their marriage, and they passed that understanding down to everyone whose lives they touched. When Benjamin finally passed in his sleep at the age of 72, Juniper was beside him, holding his hand just as she had held it thousands of times before. She mourned him deeply, but without regret, grateful for every moment they had shared, every sunrise they had watched together, every child they had raised, every quiet evening on the porch where they had simply been together. She lived another 5 years after his death, still teaching occasionally, still tending the garden he had helped her plant, still telling stories about the mountain man who had spoken soft and moved gentle and changed her entire world. When her own time came, she went peacefully, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, secure in the knowledge that she had lived a full and beautiful life. They buried her beside Benjamin, on a hill overlooking the valley, where wildflowers bloomed in spring and the wind whispered through the grass. On their shared headstone, their children inscribed simple words that told the whole story. Benjamin and Juniper Anderson. He spoke soft and moved gentle. She learned to trust again. Together they built love that lasts forever. And in the town of Holbrook and throughout the surrounding territory, people still told their story, still held them up as an example of what love could be when it was built on respect and patience and unwavering devotion. Children grew up hearing about the schoolteacher who startled at loud noises and the mountain man who made himself gentle for her sake. And they understood that true strength was not about domination, but about protection, not about forcing your will on others, but about adapting yourself to their needs. The house Benjamin built still stands on that homestead north of Holbrook, now occupied by his great-great-grandchildren who maintain it with loving care as a tribute to their ancestors. The valley is still green with good grass, the creek still runs year-round, and on quiet evenings when the wind is right, locals swear you can hear the echo of laughter from a time when Benjamin and Juniper Anderson sat on that porch and watched the sunset together, two souls who had found each other in the wilderness and built something eternal. Their love story, born in the dust and noise of a frontier town in 1882, became a part of the landscape itself, as permanent as the red rock canyons and as enduring as the mountains. It was a story that proved love could heal the deepest wounds, that patience and kindness could overcome fear, that two broken people could come together and create something whole and beautiful and lasting. And that, in the end, is the greatest legacy anyone could leave behind. A love so true and deep that it echoes through generations, inspiring others to believe in the possibility of healing, of second chances, of finding the person who will speak soft and move gentle through all the days of your life. Benjamin and Juniper Anderson found that in each other, and in doing so, they created a story that would be told and retold for as long as people believed in the transformative power of love. They started as strangers in a dusty Arizona town, came together through circumstances both tragic and fortunate, and built a life that was a testament to everything good that two people could create when they chose patience over force, kindness over cruelty, and love over fear. Their story ended not with tragedy or separation, but with lives well lived, children raised with love, a community enriched by their presence, and a love that truly did last until death and beyond. It was exactly the ending they deserved, the happy ending that seemed impossible that first day when Juniper crouched frightened in the street and Benjamin promised to speak soft and move gentle. He kept that promise every day for the rest of his life, and she responded by giving him her trust, her love, and her whole heart. Together they proved that the greatest adventures are not about conquest or gold or glory, but about finding the person who sees your scars and loves you more fiercely because of them, who adjusts their entire being to help you heal, who builds you a home not just of wood and stone, but of safety and acceptance and unwavering devotion. That is the story of Benjamin and Juniper Anderson, mountain man and schoolteacher, two wounded souls who found each other in the wild western territories and created a love for the ages. It is a story that deserves to be remembered, celebrated, and held up as an example of what love can be when it is done right, with patience and kindness and respect as its foundation and forever as its goal.